In last year's Season 1 look-back reviews, I had a look at Evil Lynn's Plot, the episode which introduced the Widgets. The Widgets appeared in a further 4 episodes, 1 in the first season and 3 more in Season 2. I mentioned that none of the comeback episodes really match the quality of the original, but there are some worthwhile things about them, so I decided to tackle the follow-up episodes in one review. The first episode to see the Widgets return was The Mystery of Many Faces, which I talked about briefly in the Rainbow Warrior Timeline Conundrum video. However, this episode barely qualifies as a Widgets episode since they only appear for the first half. The episode itself is the introduction to Many Faces, who started off as a complete asshole who was trying to hold the Widgets hostage, but eventually becomes a hero and a friend to He-Man. However, we do see Kando, Laura, and Squinch at the start, and I especially like that it's Laura who sticks up to Manny at the start. Beyond that, the Widgets are not really central to the episode's events, and I personally don't much care for Manny. However, it is a Paul Dini script, and the action direction is very good, so it's definitely at least worth a watch. Well, after that, the Widgets were the central characters of an episode called Jacob and the Widgets. What can I say about it? From the get-go, it's pretty damn stupid. It starts off with the Korodite reactor being tested by Teela, and then the Widgets go to the beach. Yup, it's just as stupid as it sounds. In fact, this scene features Duncan scolding Teela for getting a little crazy with the booster, which is both out of character and just really childish. That's a big problem with this episode. The dialogue is just complete garbage and sounds awful. Not that surprising since this episode's writer, Harvey Brenner, also wrote The Great Book's Mystery. While the actual plot concerns Merman digging into the Widgets' minds to get Korodite to make his mechanical sea monsters more powerful. He decides he needs to do this when earlier his mechanical sea monsters got destroyed by He-Man. Not that I really like Merman or anything, but I think this episode is actually a bad depiction of him, since isn't Merman's power that he commands actual sea monsters? Is that the only reason Trapjaw makes a cameo, because they are robots? Is Trapjaw moonlighting while working for Skeletor? Well, wouldn't be the first time. So, exactly who is Jacob from the title, you may be asking at this point? Well, he's a hermit who lives on the boat which Merman sinks, and, Jake, you mind? You're making me kind of, So at first, Jacob acts like a bag of dicks despite being saved because he hates people and just wants to be left alone. But when Squinch tries to make nice and offers him a fishing pole to replace the one Jacob lost, he starts to warm up to the little guys and even helps out in fighting Merman, since apparently Teela forgot how to fight and just does this stupid thing. Well, the mine gets flooded by the tide, and so He-Man has to do perhaps the most mind-blowing thing to save the Widgets' Korodite. He moves the Moon of Eternia to make the tide go down. Yes, motherfucking, flying in a Wind Raider, out of the atmosphere, no fucking spacesuit or anything. Ladies and gentlemen, we have officially peaked. So yeah, while the storyline of Jacob is actually kind of heartwarming, the rest of the episode is just really stupid. And want to know something else about this episode that makes my brain hurt? Merman apparently doesn't know the Widgets at the start, which means that this is another episode that has to take place before Evil Lynn's Plot, since Merman was clearly present at Skeletor's raid. Great. Next we have The Littlest Giant, which is also the last episode to feature Squinch the Widget. It starts off with a gust of wind blowing down a tree and Squinch having a lot of self-image issues. He becomes super envious of He-Man, and then gets an idea how to become bigger, by asking Evil Lynn for help. Yeah, seems like this is another episode which is set before Evil Lynn's Plot. So Evil Lynn tricks Squinch into giving a box to He-Man that saps his strength. He-Man's taken to Snake Mountain, Teela and company try to rescue him, and Squinch finally realizes that he's okay just the way he is. And then He-Man heads off to the Royal Palace to take down Skeletor, who, meanwhile, took over the place in record time. Unfortunately, the finale doesn't quite reflect the rest of the episode's tone, where He-Man basically bakes the bad guys into a loaf of bread and lodges them away. This is actually probably the second best episode to feature the Widgets. We see Kando, Laura, and Squinch again, which is the main reason I like it. And it's also nice that Squinch is the focus of this episode again, whereas he was really just a background character in the 2 other episodes. This episode definitely has some unique elements. We see Panther in one of his very few Season 2 appearances. Unfortunately, the episode has very erratic animation quality. By that I mean, even though most of the new animation is fairly detailed, some of it is a little bit on the silly side. My favorite bit of new animation is this close-up of He-Man tossing Panther into the dough. He looks like he's got murder in his eyes. Overall, this is a pretty good episode, and definitely worth seeing if you like Squinch. Then finally, we have The Gambler, which stars a new Widget and an original villain. The Widgets have now really upped their game and are going to provide electricity for the whole kingdom. However, the head of security, Smudge, gets suckered by a hustler named Melbrag to give him a piece of Korodite in a bet. When Smudge doesn't want to get caught, he replaces it with some of the Korodite from the mine. However, earlier the mine was flooded and the Korodite was tarnished. Smudge admits to having bet some of the Korodite when He-Man catches him in the reactor loader. The two try to stop Melbrag, but he's already used the Korodite to build a beam to zap He-Man's strength, and plans to now sell the Korodite and He-Man off to Skeletor. However, Smudge is able to distract Melbrag's guards long enough to allow He-Man to escape. He-Man ruins the deal between Melbrag and Spikor and then destroys Melbrag's beam. However, Smudge didn't realize that the Korodite from the mine was unstable until after he and He-Man had gone after Melbrag. When he reveals to He-Man that he tried replacing the missing piece, He-Man realizes that the Korodite reactor will explode with the corrupted ore inside it. He-Man unfortunately shows up when the king has already flipped the switch, and so has to hurl the reactor into orbit. Yet again, a slightly underwhelming finale. However, overall, the Gambler story would be sort of good. It's got some nice story elements, but unfortunately, I couldn't really root for Smudge. Why? Because he's voiced by Alan Oppenheimer and, well...
I gambled some of the Korodite with Melbrag and I lost!
Yeah, it's that frickin' screechy voice again. Also, this is technically the debut episode for Spikor, but he's in and out of the episode in practically the same scene, so it's a really paltry appearance. The Gambler isn't a terrible episode, and the writing is certainly way better than in Jacob and the Widgets, but it's still not exactly one of my favorite episodes. In summation, the Widgets were perhaps not used as well as I would have hoped, but I do feel like these episodes depicted the Widget Society quite well. Of the episodes discussed, I do think Mystery of Many Faces and The Littlest Giant are by far the best, even though Mystery of Many Faces only features the Widgets for a little while. The Littlest Giant is probably the best overall episode to feature the Widgets, and specifically Squinch in Season 2. Neither Jacob and the Widgets nor The Gambler are really standout episodes, but both do have their good qualities. I would say Jacob and the Widgets falls into the so bad it's good category, with its asinine dialogue and plot devices. The Gambler has a good story at heart, but Smudge just wasn't as memorable or likable as Squinch. But those are the Widget episodes. Until next time, I have the power, so can you.